these photos. The cow seems so exhausted you can literally see right through it. No, really, I can actually see the ground on the other side of its body. The animal was killed by starvation and drought, and this is definitely not an isolated case. Around the world, especially in arid places like Africa, livestock periodically suffer from malnutrition. In 2016, farmers in Ethiopia lost most of their livestock to the worst drought in 50 years. While you can somehow fix the water problem, the main source of food for cows simply disappears. However, cows are not hummingbirds that need to eat every day to avoid immediate death. Strictly speaking, cows are quite resilient and can survive even under extreme conditions. It's believed that cows can survive for up to 2 weeks without food, but after just a few days, they start to experience health problems. During prolonged starvation, exhaustion becomes clearly visible. One can see the ribs and bones, and the cow feels physically weak. Its whole body is supported by the residual fat accumulated inside the body. When it runs out, the heart stops beating and the animal dies. The end. A cow needs a lot of food to feel fine. It can consume 2% of its body weight each day, which is about 24 pounds. So even if there's sparse vegetation around caused by drought or insufficient water sources nearby, this is not enough for long-term survival. It's known that a cow will last for 60 days tops on a meager diet. However, after 4 or 5 days without food, the cow's immune system begins to deteriorate, making cows prone to diseases that can be lethal. Needless to say, no mammal can come close to fish, snakes, and insects in terms of tenacity. The video of a cockchafer beetle with missing insides has gone viral on the internet because of the beetle's special ability to live without some vital organs. Yes, some insects can survive even after losing important parts of their bodies. Well, such an insect is more like a zombie, since it can do almost nothing but slowly wander around aimlessly. But here's a more interesting fact. Some insects can still walk even after they die thanks to their decentralized nervous system. This means that instructions written by nature are still active in the insect, causing the already lifeless body to keep moving for a short period of time until it runs out of energy. In short, there was no shutdown command, so the insect carries on. However, there is another theory. Perhaps this phenomenon is caused by the parasites that penetrate the insect's body and seize control over its brain after death, making it move even without vital organs to spread and keep multiplying. And frankly, I prefer the theory that doesn't involve parasites. But the real champion of survival is a cockroach, which is no secret to anyone. If you're unlucky enough to have cockroaches in your house or apartment, you'll have to try very hard to get rid of these insects. And I'm not just talking about the fact that cockroaches multiply too quickly. Even a single cockroach can be very difficult to kill. Cockroaches can even survive decapitation. To understand how this is even possible, we need to determine why humans don't have this ability. First, decapitation causes a person to lose an enormous amount of blood, which inevitably leads to death. Second, the human body needs oxygen to function. And without the head, breathing stops since the brain is in charge of this function. Also, the human body can't eat without a head, which guarantees a quick death from starvation, provided the decapitated human has been able to stop the loss of blood and convince his lungs to breathe without the brain involved. Now let's take a look at cockroaches. They don't have a huge network of blood vessels which pump blood back and forth under great pressure. In fact, cockroaches have no blood pressure at all, which means that even when they're decapitated, they don't lose much blood. Cockroaches breathe through small holes in each body segment, not through the mouth and nose like humans. Also, a cockroach's brain doesn't control breathing, and blood doesn't carry oxygen through the body. So cockroaches don't need their head to breathe either. Good for them. Finally, cockroaches are cold-blooded, which means they need much less food than humans. They can survive for weeks on what they eat in a day. This is how a headless cockroach can live for weeks. It'll just sit around until some predator eats it or may become infected with mold, bacteria, or a virus, which also leads to death. But the interesting thing is that it's not just the cockroach body that can live without a head. The lonely head is also quite capable of thriving, waving its antenna back and forth for hours until it runs out of strength. And if you give the head nutrients and keep it in the fridge, it can live even longer. Though your family will probably not be too happy to discover a cockroach head in the fridge. Actually, not only cockroaches can boast of such independent body parts. Have you ever wondered what happens to the tentacles if you separate them from the rest of the octopus? It was discovered that the limbs can live independently from their owner thanks to the fact that each tentacle has a local nerve center that can process signals and respond to them independently. In short, that's something like a mini-brain. A famous study showed that when encountering a piece of food, a severed limb will snatch it up and try to move it in the direction of a phantom octopus mouth. In another experiment, scientists cut off several tentacles from a dead octopus and cooled them in water for an hour. Even after that much time had passed after disconnecting them from the main body, the scientists could still get some kind of reaction from the tentacles. If only humans could do the same. Wait a minute. Haven't we seen that somewhere? Well, a severed tentacle of an octopus will hardly hurt anyone, unlike a severed snakehead. Sometimes stories like these come with video proof. A man tried to take the severed head of a snake, and it bit him. As much as it might seem like just a scary story, it's actually true. Snakes don't need a whole body to kill you. That's because they're incredibly well adapted to sense threats. They have heat-sensitive pits on either side of their faces, which they use to pick up the slightest change in temperature, detecting prey or potential danger. If you're close enough, the snake will feel the body heat and you'll become, at best, a threat to it. Or at worst, its prey. These heat-sensitive pits can recognize danger for hours after death, which means that the snake can continue to defend itself. Only in a zombie style. And yes, it works even if the snake's body is separated from its head. Their deadliness doesn't end there. The snake's venom doesn't lose its potency after the snake's death, and the toxic glands are located right in its head. So yes, even a dead snake's head can kill you if enough venom is injected into your bloodstream. And how do you like the fact that a dead bee can also sting you? Of course, after dying, a bee won't be able to fly and choose where to attack, but it still remains dangerous. A peculiarity of bees and their stings is that the venom delivery system still works even if the bee is dead. A tiny organ which contains the venom and muscles that pump the venom out upon contact with the victim's skin are attached to the sting. The bee's actions are controlled not by its brain, but by involuntary impulses. So even if you pick up a dead bee or accidentally touch it, there's still the possibility it'll sting you and probably snicker at you right from hell. By the way, remember I mentioned fish tenacity? Here's a rather striking example of it. The owner of a goldfish from Taiwan noticed that it swam around the aquarium for 3 days after the pufferfish bit its head off. The goldfish was meant to be fed to the other creatures of the aquarium, but for some reason the pufferfish only ate its head. Well, tastes differ. So why did the rest of the goldfish keep swimming? Although it's widely believed no moving is possible once the brain and heart stop working, there are still cells in the body capable of responding to stimuli even after death. Charged atoms in the cells can cause movement even in the absence of brain activity. Adding sodium in the form of table salt or soy sauce greatly enhances this response, and since a pufferfish lives in salt water, there was enough sodium in the tank to allow the goldfish to swim for some time after death. Anyway, it wasn't really swimming, more like twitching. I agree, that sounds nasty. Severed frog legs start twitching for the same reason. These sodium ions found in the salt excite the nerves, resulting in very weird dancing. Okay, I admit these aren't exactly stories about amazing survival skills. These animals were already dead. Unlike the hyena, which walks only on its front legs, and yet is doing just fine. And no, it's not sick. Most likely the hyena has lost its mobility, but it's adapted and learned to cover long distances with just its 2 front legs. Also, its keen sense of smell helps the animal find carrion so it can feed and survive in the wild despite its disability. That's just how hyenas work. They are actually one of the most tenacious animals. Hyenas have survived injuries that would be fatal to other animals, such as losing a foot in a snare or after being hit by a car suffering trachea injury. Even after being mauled by lions, some hyenas still survive. In part, they have their social structure to thank for this. A wounded hyena, which has influential friends or relatives in the pack, receives help and food. There's also a story about the hyena who was once the matriarch of the pack, then lost the ability to walk around normally but still raised a healthy cub. Oh, and don't forget that hyenas almost never get sick. Nature's blessed them with everything they need to survive. And then I realized what our video is missing: birds. In 2019, a photographer spotted an injured bird in Israel. From a distance, it looked like something got stuck in it. A closer look revealed that it was a stork, and that something was an arrow. Despite this wound, the bird seemed to be able to walk and fly without any problems. When people approached to help, the stork just took off. And this case is not unique. A similar story happened in June 2006 when another stork with an arrow stuck in its body flew into the Agamon Hula Park in Israel's north. Park staff tried to catch and help the bird, but their efforts were fruitless. The stork was not in the mood to be caught or treated. It's not known how long injured storks can survive with arrows stuck inside them or where they came from, although some experts believe the birds come from Africa. The story of another wounded stork has even changed the way people think about birds in general. For thousands of years, people believed that birds hibernated like some rodents or bears. This theory was first proposed by Aristotle and was accepted without any scientific evidence, simply because the scientist was highly respected. Well, who would ever risk arguing with Aristotle himself? Other, later theories seemed even stranger. For example, in 1703, a Harvard professor wrote in a pamphlet that migratory birds fly to the moon. It wasn't until 1822, when a stork was found in Germany with a spear about 30 inches long stuck in it, that people realized these birds weren't actually hibernating. Upon inspection, it was discovered that the spear was made of African wood, from which the inescapable conclusion follows. Despite its injuries, the stork managed to fly about 2,000 miles from the continent of Africa. Aristotle was wrong after all, and that stork was stuffed, and you can now see it in the University of Rostock's zoological collection. You could say this stork was immortalized in gratitude for helping science. However, the life of most wild animals ends in a different way, either with an attack by a predator or human, or with death from starvation or disease caused by old age. Though there's one exception: termites. Instead of retiring in peace, some of them go to war using special weapons. Termite workers are very important to the colony because they do all the rough work, dig tunnels and gather food. With time, however, their mandibles wear out and they can no longer do what they did when they were young. At this point, some of them get conscripted to war. They have a pair of dark blue spots on their bodies that contain a substance that becomes toxic when a termite explodes. When other termites attack their colony, these workers bite the intruders and burst, releasing a drop of liquid that soon becomes a sticky gel. This chemical weapon paralyzes or even kills other insects that threaten the security or resources of the colony. Old termites go to war for the sake of the young termites so they can live and work in peace, even if they have to sacrifice themselves in a war against their enemies. In short, that's a heroic death. If termites had 9 lives, they would probably take over the entire planet with their chemical weapons. Fortunately, only cats are blessed with such a legendary set of lives. But even without legends surrounding them, these animals are pretty resilient. A fall from a greater height is likely to hurt them even less than a fall from a smaller one. The trick is that cats have found a loophole in physics. This was discovered thanks to a recent study. So what happens during a fall?
I'm telling you, a cat always lands on his feet. Watch!
Well, yes, cats manage to twist and land on their feet, but that's not all. During the first few feet of the fall, the cat's body will continue to accelerate, increasing the force of the impact it will feel when it finally hits the ground, which is why cats falling from floors 2 to 5 do get injured. However, falling from a 5th floor, an 11-pound cat manages to reach its terminal velocity of about 60 miles per hour. No matter how high the initial point of fall is, the final impact won't be harder. Scientists say that there may not actually be a true limit to the height from which a cat can fall and survive. Of course, it's hard to study this because no one will throw cats from heights for scientific purposes, and that's probably for the best. See you later.